But the deal is with most people, especially if you're struggling with a dysfunctional metabolism, if you've got metabolic syndrome, if you have type 2 diabetes, you're going to have elevated rates of insulin in the blood. And so that cortisol might release the fat, but then the insulin pushes it back into the fat cell for more fat storage. So things that can make stress more stressful and make cortisol promote fat storage is a metabolic dysfunction, type 2 diabetes, having to take insulin for type 2 diabetes, and then just general aging because of the shifts in menopause and testosterone.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today we are going to dive into a topic that keeps a lot of you stuck in your weight loss or even causes the weight to come back on after you dropped it. And we used to not give this much credit, but in the recent years, it's come up, and I want to talk about it today, and that is stress. You know, we talk about stress a lot with our clients at PhD, and I think it's funny, you know, stress spelled backwards is desserts. And so it definitely is a topic that we need to talk about because when we are stressed, we're going to have more cravings, we're going to have more hunger. It truly shifts our body physiology, so we start to have a different metabolism. It changes our biochemistry in a way that it's really hard to overcome from just willpower and more discipline. And I can see this stress all throughout my life. I can see it in my husband's life. I can see it in our clients all the time at PhD. So my husband, he is a foot and ankle orthopedic surgeon, now board certified in anti-aging and functional medicine. And during his residency, we were married at the time, and he was going through his surgical residency. And, you know, those times are really tough. A lot of stress. And some rotations were higher stress than others. And I remember one in particular was super stressful for him, and that was his trauma rotation. And he was gone all the time. When he was at the hospital, it was obviously really traumatic and really high stress. And during those months when he was on his trauma rotations, there was no willpower or discipline that could overcome his cravings for donuts. I don't know what it was, but I know what it is. When we were dating, he would eat like dozens and dozens of Krispy Kreme donuts. But he gained the willpower, he gained the discipline. He really wanted to overcome those cravings and hunger because he, in his past, really struggled with his weight. And so he had at that time had that discipline where he could say no, except for during those trauma rotations. And he would come home and just be like, oh my gosh, in the physician's lounge, they had these donuts and I couldn't say no. And I could see it just eating away at him. And it was because of the high stress and the lack of sleep that he couldn't overcome it. And we see this stress response in clients at PhD all the time. So there was one client in particular, Tom, and he was dropping about 3 pounds a week on average. Most of our men at PhD, they drop about 3 to 4 pounds a week. And so he was right average speed. And then he's a building contractor, and he got this really big job for a client. And it was this huge house, like 14,000 square feet. And it was going to be this client's legacy because he was diagnosed with end-stage cancer. And he had probably, I think it was like 6 to 8 months to live. And so Tom had to build this home within this very, very short time frame. And think about the stress that it put on him to build this man's legacy. He wanted to see his wife in his home. He wanted to see his kids in his home and make sure that they were safe before he passed away. And during that period of time when Tom was building this house for this client, his weight loss dramatically slowed, like 1.5, about 2 pounds per week. And Tom was doing everything right, and it didn't matter because of that high load of stress on his body. I have another client, Sarah, and she struggled despite all of the efforts, doing all of the right things again. And I was looking at her meal plan, tweaking her meal plan just like we do with all of our clients, but she wasn't seeing success. So I was like, okay, let's dive into your lifestyle. And she told me that she was taking care of her elderly parents, and it was really, really stressful to her. She hated to see them starting to break down. They were getting dementia, and they were in the state that it was breaking her heart. And it was really difficult for her to take care of her folks. So it put a lot of stress on her. So we incorporated the techniques that I'm going to talk about near the end of our time together today. And she was able to manage her stress a bit better, still while going through this and taking care of her folks. And as a result, though, of managing her stress, she was able to result in an uptick of her weight loss. And she was able to drop about 2.5 pounds a week, which is the expectation. So I share this with you because I want you to understand that stress can totally slow your weight loss. You can eat all of the right things, you can move the right way, but still, if you're not feeding your mind with the right thoughts, if you're not implementing the correct techniques to reduce your stress, then you're just going to really struggle with your weight loss attempts. So we've got to nail this. And this is what I want to do together today, is nail down what your stress level is, help you understand why stress really impacts your weight, and then what you can do about it. So let's dive into the science a little bit. So when you are stressed out, your body secretes a hormone, a primary hormone called cortisol, which I'm sure most of you have heard about. And cortisol is secreted by your adrenal glands. And this has evolutionary roots, so it's not all bad. The body is trying to do something that would help you get out of a flight or flight scary physical threat situation. So think about our ancestors. They see the lion. Oh my gosh, it's stressful. And the body releases cortisol. And what cortisol does is a whole bunch of different things, but a few of the main things is it helps the body release glucose into your bloodstream. So you've got this quick surge of glucose, thus this quick surge of energy, and you can run away from the lion. It also triggers fat storage, and specifically around the belly. So you'll probably notice that when you get really stressed out and you've got chronic stress going on, you're stressed for long periods of time, that you start to store that fat really significantly in the belly. Well, from an evolutionary perspective, this belly fat acts as a source of energy during times of scarcity. Think about our ancestors, and they couldn't find the buffalo. Well, they had this little bit of fat around the belly, and they could burn that for fuel until they find their next buffalo. So acute stress is okay. Chronic stress is not a good thing. So I want to dive into how your belly fat relates to this cortisol. So what happens in the body, like I said, you have this release of cortisol, and then the liver releases glucose into the bloodstream. So this is a good thing acutely, but persistently it is not a good thing. When you have high levels of glucose in the blood, the body can only tolerate about 1 to 2 teaspoons of glucose in the blood at any given time. So let's say you have this chronic high level of stress. You've got elevated glucose levels in the body. It's toxic when it's in the bloodstream like that. So the body tells the pancreas to secrete insulin. And insulin is this fat storage hormone. And what it does is it travels around to your cells, specifically in the muscle, but other places, and it opens up the muscle cell so that glucose that's stuck in the bloodstream can travel into your muscle cell, and you can use that for energy. Well, what happens when you have chronically high levels of glucose in the blood, I want you to imagine that that cell gets calloused over. It can't open up in response to that level of insulin anymore. And that's when you develop what we call insulin resistance. Your cells are more resistant to the actions of insulin. So now insulin travels around, it can't open the cell wall, so the glucose is stuck outside of the blood. So now you've got elevated levels of insulin and you've got elevated levels of glucose, and this isn't a good thing, especially when you've got high levels of cortisol. So these three hormones, when all three are elevated, then you're going to be in a situation where you start to accumulate more and more fat, specifically in the belly. The reason why is because insulin also triggers fat storage. So now you've got elevated insulin, and it's triggering another hormone called LPL, which is lipoprotein lipase. And I've talked about all of this in previous episodes. But what LPL does is it acts like a vacuum sucker, and it attaches to your fat cell. So when you have elevated LPLs attached to your little fat cell, you're sucking in all the fat from your bloodstream, and now your fat cells get bigger and they start to replicate or multiply, however you like to think about it, and we become fatter. Another situation that increases LPL is when you have reduced estrogen levels for you ladies, so when you go through menopause, or if you have reduced testosterone levels as a guy, so general aging. So that's why as you continue to age, you might experience more belly fat gain during periods of stress. Now you might be like, hey, Dr. Ashley, I know someone, or I get thinner when I'm stressed out. Well, that does happen to some people. You know, all those people who, when they do get stressed, they lose weight. Usually that's when individuals have a lower insulin baseline. So what happens is cortisol also has the ability to remove fat from the fat cell. It allows the fat to go into the bloodstream so you can burn it for energy, right? Think about that fight or flight. Cortisol does want to release that glucose and release that fat so you can burn it. So when you have periods of lower insulin, let's say you are at a normal healthy weight and you're eating within your carb tolerance level, you don't have elevated insulin levels, well, then that cortisol pulls the fat out of the fat cell and you can burn that and you start to lose weight. But the deal is with most people, especially if you're struggling with a dysfunctional metabolism, if you've got metabolic syndrome, if you have type 2 diabetes, you're going to have elevated rates of insulin in the blood. And so that cortisol might release the fat, but then the insulin pushes it back into the fat cell for more fat storage. So things that can make stress more stressful and make cortisol promote fat storage is a metabolic dysfunction, type 2 diabetes, having to take insulin for type 2 diabetes, and then just general aging because of the shifts in menopause and testosterone. I hope all of this is making sense, but I want you to understand the science behind how cortisol actually impacts our body and drives fat into the belly fat. If you're watching this on YouTube, I want you to comment below and tell me a little bit about your reaction to stress. Does it cause weight gain for you? Does it cause weight loss? Do you have any questions about the science behind it? And if you're listening to this on YouTube and you have any questions about stress and the metabolism, the biochemistry, come on over to YouTube and comment so that I can reply and help you out. Hey there, need extra support staying hydrated while shedding pounds and maintaining weight loss? Introducing Dr. Ashley's ELECTROLYTE Plus, which I created just for this purpose. Packed with evidence-backed ingredients like vitamin D, C, and zinc for immune support, B vitamins for energy, and a blend of full-spectrum electrolytes and minerals to hydrate, stabilize glucose levels, and curb cravings. Visit drashleywellness.com and use code ASHLEY10 for 10% off your first purchase or 20% off your first subscription order with free shipping. Plus, enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee. Back to the show. Okay, so we talked about the science behind cortisol. Now I want to talk about how cortisol impacts appetite and cravings, just like I talked about for my husband not being able to say no to the Krispy Kremes in the physician's lounge. Well, it's a real thing because cortisol also triggers the hypothalamus in your brain to be more conducive to encourage eating calorie-dense, energy-dense foods. It also impacts the reward pathway of the brain so that it really wants these sweet, energy-dense foods, and it actually makes sweet foods taste even better. Oh my gosh. So it really doesn't have anything to do with willpower or discipline. It's all driven by the reward pathways in the brain and the hypothalamus telling you that you have increased appetite and you have cravings for these energy-dense foods. So I also want to hear from you. I mean, do you crave energy-dense foods when you're stressed out? If you do, it's not your fault. It's the body physiology telling you that you need more of this energy so that you have more energy to run away from that lion. All right, so now you know the science behind it, but it's not all bad because you actually can take simple steps and totally change your response to stress. Number one is to try some breathing techniques. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can go about this. There's the common box breathing where you breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, and hold for 4 counts. So you're counting and breathing basically in a simulation of what a box looks like. I do this with my son. He's 9 years old and he's got some anxiety going on. So we do a lot of box breathing and he totally says it helps in significant ways. And I do it with him and I do feel a release of stress when I'm sitting there box breathing with him. There's also a whole bunch of different apps that you can check out. One that I have enjoyed is called Othership. And I've just tried the free items within the app. There are some paid things within the app I haven't jumped into yet. But if you have any specific breathing apps that you like, mention it below in the community if you're watching this on YouTube. Wim Hof is an amazing guy who does a lot of research on cold exposure and breathing. He has an app, a lot of information there, but get your breathing on. It really does make a big difference. Number 2 is exercise, making sure that you're getting movement. You really want to change your state. When you're stressed out, change your state. And exercising, listening to music, and changing your breath is really helpful to change your state. Number 3 is to get outside. When you see the sun, it actually changes the body chemistry. And I know this sounds odd, but get outside and be barefooted. Like actually feel your feet on the ground with the earth, and it makes a big difference in your body physiology. Number 4 is sleep, and I'm going to talk about sleep in depth in future episodes. If you've got sleep apnea, if you wear a CPAP machine, how to potentially reverse that, because that does impact your sleep significantly. And for most of you, if you have sleep apnea, you don't have to have it. It is something that you can let go of. But in general, for good sleep, you want to make sure that you have a routine. Treat yourself like the little baby that you put to bed at the same time, you feed at the same time, you wake up at the same time. Sleep is really important. Making sure that when you do sleep, it's really dark. Doug and I have big windows on one side of our bedroom, and he is all into this data. And so he wears an Oura ring. I hate for the Oura ring to tell me if I've had a bad night of sleep, because then the next day I'm all pissed off when I don't need to be. So I let the Oura ring go. But for you all who are biohackers and love all that data, Oura ring can be helpful. And anyway, he was measuring his sleep using the Oura ring. We got some blinds to cover up the windows, and his sleep data improved significantly with the darker sleep environment that we're in now. And then making sure that the sleep environment is cold, like less than 65 degrees is the target. I know it is freezing for me, but that is what the research shows. I don't like it that cold, so we've compromised, because that's what marriage is all about, right? We should do an episode on compromise in marriage, because Doug and I are still learning that one. But he has an Ooler, and an Ooler is this sleep pad, this cool pad that he puts just on his half of the bed. Cools his bed down like he's, up in the Arctic polar environment, and I am still cool and comfortable. So that's something that you can consider. Number 5 is social connection. It actually is really important to your body and helps to reduce cortisol when you connect with your loved ones, your family members, the family members who don't raise your stress levels, that is. And when you spend time with those who you love, we can see cortisol decrease, and we can see serotonin and dopamine, those feel-good neurotransmitters, increase significantly. And then, of course, focus on your nutrition. Decrease sugar, decrease caffeine, decrease alcohol, and then decrease carbs, especially the junky processed carbs. You're going to want to decrease those. Specific carbohydrates increase insulin. Remember, I've talked about that in previous episodes. So if you're eating a high carb diet, you're going to have higher insulin levels. And therefore, when stress comes in and cortisol comes in, that insulin and that cortisol work together to promote more of that fat storage, specifically in the belly. And then meditation. Meditation is a huge tactic that you can implement into your life to help reduce stress. I specifically like Joe Dispenza, and his work has really changed my life. I want to hear who you like to follow, or what apps you use, or just, what philosophies you like from meditation. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube, drop a comment below and help out the community and share with us about meditation. It's one of my favorite things, and I want to be sure that I learn from you. And then the last two things that you can focus on when it comes from stress and reducing stress is to focus on mindset. I talk about mindset a lot, but it is really the key to changing your life. So from a mindset perspective, one tactic that you can take is think that the universe gives you only that which you can handle at exactly the right time. And I know a lot of people don't like the thought of this, but it really helps me when I'm going through stressful times to think, okay, the universe gave this to me, God, source, whatever that might be for you, that higher power, dropped this in my lap, and it wouldn't have been dropped in my lap if I can't handle it and serve and grow out of it. And it just helps me reframe my mindset. It's this how is this happening for me and not to me? My life can be pretty stressful as a wife, as a mom of 3 young kids, as a business leader of a big company with over 70 team members and thousands of clients. It can get a little overwhelming. Plus, my body is overcoming chronic Lyme disease as a result, stage 4 adrenal fatigue. Like, there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot that happens. And so if I keep thinking to myself, why is this happening for me, not to me, it changes my perception around stress, and your stress perception is huge. A few weeks ago, I was meditating and I looked up and I was like, okay, I need a miracle. I need you to please send me the right people to help me create the massive positive impact I know that I am here on this earth to do. And I swear to you, in the next 2 weeks, 3 key people from PhD left me, and I was like, wait, I did not want this to come in this package. This is not what I was asking for. And they left me because of different personal responsibilities they had, an indefinite maternity leave, an engagement, all of these amazing things that I was excited for these folks for. But I didn't mean for these holes to come in this way, but I had to sit there and I had to tell myself, okay, this is happening for me. This is happening for my company. This is happening for my clients and my team, and it's going to be okay. So that's what I urge you to do. I know it's really, really hard in the moment, but it is helpful for me. And then the last thing is to change your perception around stress. So Andrew Huberman and Elia Crum did this really great podcast on stress perception. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is so true. So if you think of stress as being a threat, then your body is going to release these specific hormones we talked about. If you think of stress as more of a challenge, then your body actually secretes different hormones. It secretes adrenaline and DHEA, which helps increase focus and increases motivation and helps to encourage a positive mindset. Isn't that wild? We always think of stress as being something negative, and I know I do too. In this episode, we've been talking about why stress is so bad, but if you think again of stress not being bad, but stress as being a challenge and something you're going to grow from, oh my gosh, it totally can act as a catalyst toward positive change and improved performance. So your perception on how you think about stress will totally impact whether you're going to use this stress for positive good for your health, your life, those around you, or if it's going to be something negative and detrimental. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you got lots of value from it. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and do leave comments below. I love to read them and respond. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, please do follow and leave a review. All of these things will give back and impact the algorithm so that we can positively impact more people. So remember, you've got to step up to make a change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and do not negotiate with your body. See you next time.